Well, hello, action takers. We are here back after day 2 of the 5-day Unshakable Challenge with Tony Robbins, and it was a delightful day. What did we learn? Well, let me ask you, how do we get new results? The answer is that we take new action. Today, we learned exactly what to do to become the type of person that takes consistent action in the direction of the results that we want. Today was all about expanding our identity and becoming more, and Tony gave us the specific steps, examples, and tools of how to do exactly that. This isn't theory, it's practical, proven, and these are things that can be easily applied. I'm David B., one of your hosts of the IDK WTF I Was Doing podcast, and Teresa Merrick is my partner in crime, and we are both attending this challenge along with you and more than 1 million others. Now, Teresa wishes she was here on the recap, but like many of you, maintains a household full of children, pets, a spouse, and a plethora of responsibilities, and she knows how hard it can be to squeeze a freaking 5-day challenge like this into her schedule. And that's exactly why we're putting this very quick recap together for you every day, because we are here to support you, make your life easier, and ultimately happier while you're becoming the best version of yourself. So be sure to listen all the way through, and if you're new, be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss tomorrow's recap, because we are here for you and excited to get unstuck together.
Have you ever started something new and didn't finish it?
You were excited. You invested time and money.
You got stuck.
I'm Teresa Merrick.
And I'm David B.
And this is the podcast with 2 ADHD entrepreneurs, and we've been there.
And worked with hundreds of people in the exact same place.
The IDK WTF I Was Doing podcast will take you away from feelings of frustration and overwhelm.
And lead you to the clarity you need to take action and get shit done.
Listen today, because it's important to admit that no one really knows
what the fuck they're doing.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to another day, another really good day of the Unshakable Challenge with Tony Robbins and his crew. If you don't know me, my name is David B., and I'm covering just a short recap for anyone who maybe isn't able to jump on in the middle of the day, or this is going all over the world. So there's a lot of different time zones. So I'm certain there's a lot of people who can't see it, and they might be super busy. So they might need to get like the Cliff's Notes version, if that's still a thing. Let's just jump into it. So today, KK started us off once again, and she thanked us, and she congratulated us for coming back, because we are all in this together, and signing up for something is one step. Right? It's always the first step, and a lot of people do it, but the key is showing up, right? A lot of people sign up, but not a lot of people show up, and coming back for a second day is very important. And you're going to notice every single day as it goes on, less and less people are there. I'm trying to help by doing these little summaries, but the ones who make it to the end, it pays off long term. Today, we're talking about the unshakable identity, what life would be like. What would life be like if you were able to tap in to your most confident and driven self? And basically what he's doing is we're going through that exact process and getting some really practical tools to enact that. So started off with Brian Bradley, who's a physio instructor, and he actually did a nice exercise, which I really enjoyed, that helped us to get our posture in line, because if we're going to be sitting down for a couple hours, it was a great little exercise to just prep our bodies for that. And I learned a couple things in the 3 minutes we did it. So it was really nice. Tony Robbins came out, and he actually started talking with some of the posts that came up from last night's homework. And he really thanked us for posting, because a lot of people see being vulnerable as a weakness, but Tony sees it as a strength, because being raw is really the most real thing you can do. And then being unshakable, again, the reason it's called this, it's not about being emotionally fit. Oh, it is about being emotionally fit, not emotionally intelligent. There are a lot of smart people out there who do dumb things, but emotional fitness is how you build courage. It's how you build resilience. And just like physical fitness, emotional fitness can be trained, and it absolutely does not come naturally. The problem with the human brain is it's designed for survival, not happiness. We're always constantly, the brain is constantly looking out for danger, something that would make us need to fight or run from. But basically, once you learn the skills taught today, you learn how to activate your happiness as well as your courage. So, and today it's really talking about changing that story and changing our mindset and making that change last. So at this point, he jumped into kind of the first of his tangents. And what I really actually like about Tony Robbins, which is an interesting thing, is when he's giving his presentations, he does go off on these little sidebars of stuff he's just naturally currently passionate about. He definitely does it less when it's a bigger event. So something like this with over 1 million people, there's a lot of new people that don't really know him, so he's not as comfortable like talking about some of his viewpoints. But when you get him in some smaller meetings with just a few hundred people, he goes off, and it's really insightful about some of the things going on in the world, because he's connected to everything. Literally, I think I said it yesterday, he works with politicians, he works with the top athletes of the world, he works with the wealthiest men in the world. He's seen all of it, and he knows the stuff. He probably knows more about how things work behind the scenes than anyone else out there. So, all right. So the first of his tangent was really interesting. And what he talked about was that winter is here and the pattern has been coming, which is something that he said for the last five years, right? But what he said is winters happen every 70 years or so, but good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times, and bad times create good people. And kind of the tangent he went on is the silent generation is apparently, I'm not firsthand familiar with this, and that's the great generation. So the parents of baby boomers were really similar to Generation Z, the current youngest generation. So he was saying that back in 1910, that was a really big time of excess and surplus. And so you have flappers, and they were going to their parties and just living it up. And their parents were like, those lazy little kids don't want to do anything except party and drink, because we had just won World War I, is what he was saying. And so that created times of like a summer, a time of extra. But then the Great Depression hit when those kids were, in their early teens and 20s. So, and that was 10 years of just the worst struggle. And then right after that, World War II hit, which was another intense struggle where there was a time that we didn't think we were going to win that war. And so at that point in history, we really thought the world was potentially ending. And then that generation came out of those hard times back in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then created a really strong economy and really built up the United States to what it is today. And then he kind of snapped back and realized oh, I'm talking to a whole bunch of new people, so I shouldn't go down this tangent. And it was pretty interesting. So we got back on track with the normal agenda, but I think it's a really interesting story to pay attention to, and just the comparison of the pattern that he was mentioning. There's going to be another story he says later that I think is an interesting perspective that ties into this. But getting back on track here, he then summarized yesterday where we covered basically, if you're not getting the results you want, the number one thing to do is to change your energy. And you do that by moving your body and using your voice. We also yesterday covered the concept of not getting stuck in the tyranny of how, because the staying in the how keeps us stuck in the story, and the story keeps us stuck in the pattern. And that's why we learned the framework yesterday of the change your state, change your story, change the strategy. We implement that method to change the bad pattern instead of what most people do. Try out a strategy, it doesn't work, which reinforces the story, which doesn't work, which brings the negative state back, keeps us in that negative state, or a state of negative energy, right? So he goes on to say that the stories we tell ourselves become our beliefs. The beliefs we have dictate our values, and our values dictate our life. And the number one belief that controls everything in your life is your identity, how you perceive yourself. And he talks about this at length, but that's the core concept of everything that this day covers, is belief creates and belief destroys. Belief can make you happy or it can make you outraged. And then he says, what is a belief? What is a belief actually? So what is something you believe? And he defines it as a belief is nothing but a feeling you have of absolute certainty about something. So it's a feeling of absolute certainty about a topic. Now, the benefit of it being a feeling is all feelings can be changed in a moment, right? He gave another example. So, and this was actually one of my aha moment examples for me. And we all get these aha moments in these events. So I'll share my first one in a second after I talk about how he presented this. So he says, what is life? Like, really take a moment and define it. Like, how do you define what is life? And he had people put it in the chat and he was reading out some different examples. But one is that, so if you feel that life is a test, right? What does that do to the way that you perceive the world and the way you're going to be acting in it? If someone sees life as a test, they're going to interact it feeling judged. There's passing and failing. A lot of people said, I'm not good at tests. This is terrible, right? So if you look at it that way, or life is a battle, right? How is someone going to go through life? What does their day-to-day's interaction look like if they truly believe life is a battle and they're constantly having to win or lose? But what if we change that outlook and say, what if life is a blessing? How would our normal day-to-day things be going at that point? What if we say life is a dance? It's exciting. You can do it with others. Isn't that a much different energy? Now, my first instinct was to say that just the first thing that came to my head was life is existing. And I feel like that's such a boring answer, but that's really how I've been going through life, especially the last 3 years, is just existing without purpose. So what's your first feeling of what is life? And so then he says, which one is right? Here's the thing. You can say all of them are right, but that's not how the mind works. We choose one. And remember yesterday when he said, we don't experience life. We experience the life we focus on. And that is such a perfect aha moment example, is like, how are you viewing life? And it's just what you're focusing on, because it could be any of those things, but it is only the one you're focusing on. So our habits are the actions we focus on, and we focus on those actions and create those habits because of our beliefs. The single most powerful belief that influences everything you do in your life is your identity, how you perceive yourself and how you define yourself. So lasting change will always require an upgrade of your identity. The strongest force of a person's personality is the need to stay consistent with how you see yourself. And part of that is also defined by who we are not. Okay, I define myself a certain way, but I also define myself as not a morning person. So if we define ourselves as a procrastinator, we're always going to put situations in our life where we procrastinate. Things will always come up. I'm not a morning person, or I'm not good at this, or I'm not a person who is outspoken, right? So his example was of someone who quit smoking. So he can say, if someone says, hey, I'm trying to quit smoking and I'm 7 days without a cigarette, and I think this time is going to be the one, Tony Robbins says he knows that that person is going to go back because they haven't identified with being not a smoker. If you identify yourself as not being a smoker, then it's much easier to say, no, I don't want a cigarette. But if you identify yourself as someone who smokes, but is choosing not to smoke right now, you're just going to go back, and then you're going to say, I made it 15 days this time. So keeping track of the days really just shows you're still aligned with that past behavior. This was another aha moment for me as well, because growing up, I was always an athlete. So I did sports in high school. I did competitive MMA. I was doing parkour. I did like acrobatic yoga. And then I got into running. So my identity changed from being an athlete to trying out all these different sports to just being a runner. And I loved running. And so a few years ago, I actually injured my foot and I could not run anymore. And I do not work out almost at all, right? Because I would just love going for long runs. But really, since COVID hit, I have not worked out even a little bit because I can't, because I've got a recurring injury. Now, because I identify myself as a runner or someone who used to run, and I stopped identifying myself as an athlete who would be at the gym doing whatever they needed to do to get fit or whatever it was they were trying to do, I've completely let my health decline. And so that was an interesting perspective shift. If I switch back to that, well, I'm an athlete, which means I need to go work out every day, I'm much more likely to get there. And then he says, if you want to change your life, you just need to expand your identity. And identity doesn't just affect you. It affects every relationship you have. It controls how you interact with them. If you believe like men or women only want one, if you believe men only want one thing, you're going to interact with men a certain way. If you think that all women are stuck up and manipulative, you're going to act another way. But if you think women are just these beautiful divine creatures who actually bring life into the world that all of us have to go through, and relationships are strong and powerful, and it doesn't matter who you meet because strangers are just friends you haven't met yet, right? You're going to interact with things very, very differently. Most people define their identity by what they do. They define who they are by what they do. But we're all just human. We all make mistakes, and we all tend to judge ourselves way too soon. So if we make mistakes, then we cement that into our mind and say, I am not this person who can do this thing. So he says one really good way to get around this is the philosophy of stretching. And he got into the habit of saying, if I can't do something, then I must do it. And he says, if this thing will make you a better person and it's something you want to do, but you think you don't have the money to do it or the education to do it or the experience to do it, if there's some reason you think you can't do it, then you must do it. The most powerful way to influence new identity is to put yourself into new states, mentally and physically. Here was the second little tangent he went on that I thought was a really interesting one. So he gave an example of, so apparently in the Korean War, it was again like a communism, capitalism war kind of a thing. In Korea, they were able to get American soldiers to flip sides more than in any other war that's ever been fought. And the way that they did it was instead of torturing, because if you torture someone, you might be able to get them to give you some information. They might get false information, but they keep their identity as a soldier, as an American soldier who just had to tell them or he was going to get killed, right? But what they did, so instead of torturing to get the information or whatever they needed, they actually just sat and had a conversation with them, a very long conversation. It'd be like 24 hours of just talking and tiring and wearing them down. But they would really just explain, hey, why do you guys think America is so great? Because you guys have homelessness in America, and here we don't. And everyone has a job. And he says they didn't tell him the jobs pay 50 cents an hour. And what they would do was actually they got them to change their identity and their values. And it made them actually work with the foreign, with the enemy, which was just crazy. But it's just another interesting thing to pay attention to. Now, he gets back on track here. So when thinking of what we're trying to do is upgrade our identity, we're trying to expand ourselves, we're trying to upgrade our lives. And he says, here's an example. How do you make your dog, right? As you go get a puppy, what is it that makes a dog your dog, right? You name him, and then you teach him to come to you when you call. So if you name the things within yourself and you teach them to appear when you need the thing, you can quickly control your state and control your life. And this is where the 5 to Thrive technique comes in. What controls your life is your state. You don't need to deny this. And again, that state of energy, right? So this is how it all fits together, yesterday and today. You don't need to deny the state if you're in a negative state, but you want to be able to identify it and change it. And it was funny because he did start having tech problems here as well. So again, huge budget, team of people, which they of course fixed it because it's a whole team of people fixing things. But yeah, so you don't need to deny the state, you identify it and change it. So what he did is you have to draw a triangle, because I don't have a team of people and we can't put like a little graphics up yet, but one day soon. So you draw a triangle. On each side of this triangle is going to be a different thing to focus on to help you identify the state and change it. So if you find yourself in a negative state, the one thing you can do is change your physiology. There's a lot of different ways to change your physiology. You can do drugs, you can eat food. These are definitely things that will change our physical state, which changes our mood. But the healthiest one to do is movement. So he had to sit in our chair and act like an excited toddler, right? That changes our state because we're using our voice and using our bodies to move. And again, massive change creates more results. A little change creates little results. So if you just kind of like sit up and if you just do a power pose, that's one thing that you can do. Or if you just jump around, you're like, I'm so excited, right? It might seem crazy, but it's going to change your state faster and more effectively, even if it's a little weird, right? So the second thing you can do is change your focus. So if you're in a negative state, you cannot be sad and grateful at the same time. So think of something you're grateful for. Get an emotion of gratitude inside of you. Really visualize a time when you felt gracious. Think about sensual moments, right? Try and think about sometime you were incredibly feeling passionate. And you can think about funny times in your life. What was like a time that was so funny, and just recap that moment. And that helps. Changing your focus will get you from a negative state to a positive state. And then the third thing is changing your language, because words absolutely create meaning. Attaching a word to an experience embeds it inside of you, right? And this is an example, again, if you're using the words, oh, I suck at that, or I'm an idiot, man, I'm stupid, that is reinforcing it in your mind. So he gave the example of, he was at a bar with his friend, and the friend's, oh, I got to go back to my old ball and chain. And that word of associating like your partner, even jokingly, right, as a ball and chain, is so much different than saying, oh, I've got to go back to my loving, adoring wife or my loving, adoring partner. And even when you feel like it's a joke, those words have power. So maybe there are words that you need to take out of your vocabulary. So those are the three: focus, language, and physiology. There it is. So now, on the triangle, around the triangle, you write a circle or draw a circle, because those are the ways to change the state. So those are the things to change the state, but you also need a story to go towards, and you need a compelling future. So above it, you write compelling future, because you need a reason to use these skills. Something has to be bigger than yourself to remind you to keep working on yourself to get towards where you want to be. Is it making a legacy for your family? Is it trying to impact and change the world? Is it trying to change generational trauma? It's bigger than you that you can focus on. And then at the bottom of the circle, you have identity shapes your choices. So the definition of who you are and who you want to be would be at that bottom, because we don't do what we can, we do what we believe we are. So you have a written identity of that perfect person you want to be, the compelling future that you want to go towards and create, and then the ways to get there by changing your state with your focus, physiology, or your language. So it's a neat, like, I feel like that's a really good analysis tool, right? So if you're ever just feeling stuck and you look at this triangle with a circle around it, you can say, what am I doing? Why am I making these same mistakes? And try and just self-analyze and say, okay, is it my focus? Is my focus wrong? What can I do to get out of this state and start getting back towards my compelling future and becoming this version of myself that I want to be? So the last thing that he talks about is the power of a brand. And the brand, where your identity is your vision of yourself, a brand is much more the vision of how the world sees you and the you you're putting out to the world. And the power of your brand brings certainty. And the more you can brand yourself in your own mind, the more powerful it becomes. And then the more it just lets people associate you with this brand. And he says your income is always more tied to your brand than you can imagine. It affects business, relationships, and it's not just a brand in a business sense, but really it's like the package of like how you want to be presented to the world. And he had to speak through this because he was running over time as well. But it's a really good concept, because once you create, an author does it, actors do it. They, like a lot of actors and musicians and authors, they have fake names. Their brand is like their stage persona is not who they are. They change their name because they turn themselves into a brand. So when they show up to an audition, they are now this actor. The best version of themselves they want to be because they've changed their name. And when they're going by that name, they project themselves as that person and people will see them as that person, if that makes sense. So the 5 steps to create a brand is number 1, understanding that true power of identity, which we just covered this entire day. The step number 2 is to identify and articulate your competitive advantage. Answer the question, who are you, in just a few sentences. And it works with dating. So if you go on a dating app, on a date, someone says, who are you? You want to really say, oh, I'm this type of person. It works when you're out at a party. That's like the number 1 question people ask. So who are you? What do you do? And then that's the answer that you can give. And it allows other people to perceive you as that person. So that's number 2, is identify and articulate your competitive advantage. Number 3 is to practice communicating it congruently. So the more you practice talking about it, the better you're going to be. And step number 4 is to live it. You can't just pretend to be this person. You need to embody it more. And then the more you do start by pretending, but the more you pretend and the more you do it, the more it becomes you. And then the last step is to market it. So that's who you project yourself to the world. It's changing your profiles on your social media. Yeah, and upgrading all of that is a great way to do it, but just getting that vision out there more. So then he goes into the homework, and basically it's exactly what we covered. What is your old identity? Either something you have gotten out of and have changed an identity, like me I was an athlete, I became a runner, and now I'm an injured runner. And what's your new unique identity? So that's something I'm going to figure out right after this live. So that's 1. What's your old identity? What's your new identity? Number 2 is, how can you expand this in 2023? Right? And then prompt number 3 is, how will this change your life? It was a super good day. KK then came back on and just congratulated us for being there once again. We're going to have 2 guest speakers tomorrow, which is the founder of Spanx and the founder of a makeup company. And I've seen them both before, and they are absolutely wonderful speakers. But yeah, so all in all, I really think this was a great day to sit and watch the whole thing. It's not necessarily this would be a good day that you could just put it on in the background as you're cooking dinner or doing something else, because I don't feel like you necessarily have to be there going through all of these exercises. They do help, but just hearing the messages and the stories he told, I think, was the most powerful part of this one. Like yesterday's, that exercise was just so good, but today's, I think, was just the messaging and the perspective shifts of what he covered. It was wonderful. But no, it's been a great 2 days so far. Hopefully you guys are getting some value out of this. So I do appreciate you guys being here. I'm doing this every day, so definitely hit that follow button. I appreciate you guys, and we will see you soon. And you guys have a wonderful evening, night, and day wherever you are.
Have you ever started something new that you were really excited about and invested time or money into, but after doing it for a while, you reach a point and you just feel like, I have no idea what the F I'm doing?
There's that bubbling up of frustration because you're not quite as good as you thought you'd be, or it's nowhere near as easy as you expected. Then suddenly, a wave of guilt comes at the same time, and you don't really want to or feel like you can express this to anyone.
Having a dream you want to accomplish can be very sad and isolating. It's lonely because visionaries tend to see the world the way that it could be, instead of settling for the way the world currently is, like most people do.
We believe this so deeply that we wrote a book with the exact 4 steps to help.
This guide is designed to take you out of that feeling of frustration and overwhelm and lead you into the calmness and clarity that you need to reach the life that you know in your heart you're destined to have.
If you've started a project or a goal but have stopped, gotten stuck, or are starting to feel burned out, this is 100% the book for you.
Go to idkwtfpodcast.com today and download your digital copy with the coupon code ACTION to get it on us, because we want to join you and be your supportive friends and partners throughout your journey.
It's only free for a limited time if you use the code ACTION by going to our website, idkwtfpodcast.com.
Check it out today and let's get unstuck together.